Hi Taurus, this is Tisch Aitken, and this is your monthly report for the month of June. We begin the month in eclipse season, and there's a lot going on. Eclipses bring a heightened sense of activity, a lot happening at once, major turning points. Sometimes there's a heightened sense of anxiety, and they bring things to light. At the end of May, there was a total lunar eclipse that took place at 5 degrees and 26 minutes of the mutable fire sign of Sagittarius. And this lunar eclipse took place in your 8th house of wounds and transformation, death, and joint resources, as well as renewal. Lunar eclipses help us process things emotionally, and it's a full moon on steroids. Hopefully it brings things to completion that you need to release, but it probably was emotional in the 8th house. And Mercury is retrograde as we begin this month and will be retrograde until June 22nd. Not to mention that Venus, which rules your sign, is out of bounds until June 18th, which means it exceeds the sun's declination and does not adhere to the rules. Can act very erratic, a lot of emotional and relationship and financial stuff going on. So it's a crazy month as we begin the month, but it can be very exciting and creative. Just expect that we all have to be very fluid and adaptable. You are a fixed sign, and there are 4 points in Gemini as we begin the month, which is a mutable air sign. Mercury being the ruler of Gemini in its dignity, retrograde, so also not, playing by the rules. And then Venus, which rules your sign, is out of bounds. And we have Jupiter and Neptune both transiting in the mutable water sign of Pisces. So again, a lot of flow, ebbs and flows, but basically you've got to be able to adapt this month. We all have to. And on June 2nd, Venus changes signs and enters the cardinal water sign of Cancer, where it will remain until June 27th. And it will be transiting in your 3rd house of communication, local community, sales, and commerce. And this is an excellent time if you're single, for meeting people. It's excellent if you have your own business, or if you're looking for a job, for networking, making connections, and learning, enjoying learning and writing and communication of every form. On June 3rd, there are really nice aspects. At 3:05 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, the Sun in Gemini forms a beautiful trine to Saturn in Aquarius. At the end of May, Saturn stationed retrograde on May 23rd at 13 degrees of the fixed air sign of Aquarius in your house of career and life goals. And Sun trine Saturn helps you to stabilize what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to embark on some business endeavors, whatever it is, that can be very stabilizing energy. And later that day at 7:33 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Venus, which is the ruler of your sign, forms a beautiful trine to Jupiter. Jupiter is now in Pisces for a little while, and it's transiting in your house of friends and groups and social media and marketing through social media. This is great for meeting people. This is great for business opportunities, making connections. We've got the 2 benefics in harmony, one of them being the ruler of your sign. And Jupiter is transiting in your house of friends and groups until the end of July. So again, if you are looking to meet people and make connections, even though this is a crazy and unpredictable month, there are many opportunities to do so in a variety of ways. So that's something that is a nice part of this equation. On June 5th may not be the day, though, because let's see, we've got Mercury squaring Neptune, and this occurs at 3:05 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and that could bring deception or miscommunication. Mercury is already retrograde. And then at 3:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Mars opposes Pluto, and that can be very combative energy. Those are both the rulers of Scorpio, and this is just, there could definitely be that would be a day to lay low if you're able. And then let's see here, on June 10th, there's the solar eclipse that takes place at 6:53 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time at 19 degrees and 47 minutes of the mutable air sign of Gemini. This new moon eclipse occurs when the moon perfectly aligns between the earth and the sun and blocks the light from the sun's surface, and it brings things to light. And in my opinion, this solar eclipse will be very intense because Mercury is retrograde, Venus is still out of bounds, and let's see, Moon and Mercury meet up at 8:38 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, translating the information that will inevitably pour through. There'll be a lot of stories, a lot of revelations, a lot of news coming out in the month of June. So that happens, and then when the moon goes void of course, it does so at 1:38 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time with a square to Neptune, which further confuses things, but also helps to bring and uncover deception and bring it to light. Later that day, the sun meets up with Mercury at 9:13 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And so a lot of information, but the eclipse will be all over the place. And there's a duality to Gemini, so probably more than one story. And again, Mercury is retrograde and very connected with this new moon, as is Neptune. The moon goes void with a square to Neptune. And on the 11th of June, Mars enters the fixed fire sign of Leo. And this is transiting, Mars will be transiting in your house of home and family and emotional foundation until July 29th. And that could be difficult with familial situations. There could perhaps be conflict with relatives or around home. So finding ways to take action at home to find your comfort, because it's not the easiest placement with Mars transiting in the 4th house. On the 12th of June, Venus, which rules your sign, forms a square to Chiron, the wounded healer, which is transiting in the sign of Aries in your 12th house of the subconscious mind. And this could be an opportunity to do some healing work. Later in the day, Venus forms a sextile, which is a helpful aspect to Uranus, which is transiting in your sign. And this occurs depending on if you're Pacific Daylight Time. This occurs on June 12th at 10:38 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or early in the morning Eastern Daylight Time on June 13th at 1:38 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And that could bring helpful and creative solutions for financial and emotional issues. But later that day, the sun squares Neptune at 7:40 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and realistically, more deception or confusion gets brought to light. On June 14th is a very big day because Saturn squares Uranus in your sign, and the two square one another at 13 degrees of Aquarius and Taurus. And this takes place at 6:01 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. That's a day you definitely want to note because you're one of the main players. All the fixed signs get impacted, and they are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, but you will be feeling this very strongly, as will Aquarius. And the first time this occurred was on February 17th, and that's when the big power outage occurred in Texas. So Saturn is the structure and Uranus is chaos. They are both the rulers of Aquarius, but they couldn't be more different. So each of us needs to figure out how we can structure the chaos and work with this to contain it and invent a new world, because we are in the new age of Aquarius and Uranus rules the sign of Aquarius. But that gives us the growing pains and the challenges connected with this process. Not an easy energy. On the 20th of June, we have two big events. Jupiter, which is the grand benefic, stations retrograde at 11:06 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time in your house of friends and groups. And you feel that energy 5 days before and 5 days after. And that could be an excessive energy. Jupiter loves being in Pisces, but it is very emotional. So it could be expanding the emotions, the confusion, could be a lot going on with friends. And later that day, the summer solstice occurs when the sun is at its maximum declination in the sky, at its highest point in the northern hemisphere and at the lowest point in the southern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, this begins summer, and it's the longest day of the year. And in the northern hemisphere, it begins winter, and it's the shortest day of the year. It's a day to reflect on what you want the winter or the summer season to be, depending on where you are, and honor that energy. But that's also a big day, and the sun will be transiting in Cancer. And for you, this is going to be occurring, let's see here, in your house of communication and thoughts and ideas. And that also is helpful for promoting yourself and for dealing with other people and networking. So that's a nice energy. On the 21st of June, Venus trines Neptune, and Venus is the ruler of your sign, and Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, and that's a really creative and romantic energy, and could be excellent for you, for meeting people, for romance, for connecting, also good for business. Very nice energy. On the 22nd of June, there's more challenging energy because Venus squares Chiron, the wounded healer. And no, sorry, it doesn't do that. It opposes Pluto, and that could bring breakups. And Venus rules your sign. That day, the sun trines Jupiter, and that's a very optimistic energy. But Venus and Pluto clashing is not an easy influence. And again, Venus rules your sign, and Pluto rules the sign of Scorpio. There could be power struggles, love triangles, issues around money. Not an easy energy, so just recognizing that. On the 24th of May, there's a full moon that occurs at 2:40 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and it is at 3 degrees and 28 minutes of the cardinal Earth sign of Capricorn. And this full moon sets off where the solar eclipse was on December 26th. So maybe you get more information of what you were dealing with at that time. This full moon falls in your house of teaching and learning and publicity. Hopefully it brings fruition to attempts that you've been making at promoting yourself. Maybe you've been taking classes or teaching, but this full moon brings release. It's also getting us on the way out of eclipse season. Not quite yet. We'll still be reconciling the stories. But and then on the following day, on June 25th, Neptune stations retrograde. And we feel that energy 5 days before and 5 days after. And that occurs at 3:21 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time at 23 degrees of the mutable water sign of Pisces, the sign that Neptune rules. Whoa, that's going to be very emotional. It can be very confusing for those that are very vulnerable or fragile. Already being an eclipse season, many that are not doing very well there can be departures. And for those that are very emotional or empathic, this could be a very heavy time with the eclipses, with Neptune so prominent this month, and with Neptune stationing retrograde. So check in if you feel that way. Check in with friends and loved ones that you feel are in that place. And know that Jupiter's going to be in Pisces until the end of July, and it is magical there. So really for you, it's transiting in your house of friends and groups and wishes, tapping into that magic, but knowing that June is going to be a really intense month. So I wish you a lot of luck, and take care, Taurus. Thank you. Bye-bye.